Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. We will wait for a few minutes until people join. We'll just allow them to join, and I'll try to admit everyone that joins. So please stay with me, and we will start in a few minutes. In the meantime, while we're waiting, feel free to drop your name, LinkedIn profile, what you're working on in the chat, so we'll understand, who is here. You're going to have an opportunity also to connect with one another, which is a great opportunity as we have builders from both corporations, startups, PMs, innovation managers, and many other functions. All right, so I'm going to start. Welcome, everyone. We're going to have other people joining, and I'll try to admit them as I speak. Feel free to put your cameras on if you want to get them. If you don't want to be on camera, that's great as well. The chat is on. I might not see what you're writing as I speak, but I will definitely look at it every once in a while and try to respond to any questions. But we'll have time for questions at the end. Um, Today we're going to have a lightning lesson here on Maven with an introduction to AI-driven lean startup and how AI is transforming lean startup, the lean startup methodology, and where is it going, and my thinking process around the different tools that you and I can apply the lean startup methodology. If you haven't, please drop your name, LinkedIn profile, and what you're working on so we'll understand who's in. And you can do this as we go along. I want to start this session with my own personal journey with Lean Startup. So I have a close relationship with the Lean Startup and the methodology and the movement because it changed the way I build, the way I invest, and really the way I work with startups. Um, Really, my personal journey is that in my first startup, my co-founder and I, who's my best friend, we developed the product for almost 2 years without launching. So we added features, we debated with each other which features would work and not. That is kind of the common classic mistake of founders, but that was in 2013, 2012, early days, not today when the ecosystem and lean startup is really more common. But we did this, and then my wife came to me and said to me, "All right, what's happening?" And then I tried to figure out what to do, and I found the Eric Ries book, The Lean Startup, and that completely changed how I work. And really, that transformed. We launched a product. We understood that nobody signed up. And then we tried to iterate and adopt the Lean Startup methodology. And what you can see here in the image is after I've done that, that was a lecture that I gave for AWS at the DLD event about my insights and learnings from Mobifile for my first startup, about the lean startup methodology, my mistakes, and how I'm going to change that. And that was, and the lean startup really has been there for me since then until this very day. But I think that it's evolving. And what I'm going to show you today is how I think it's going to evolve and different ways, practical ways to apply things, the lean startup with AI. Um, my background really is investing in building in startups. I built four companies and three as a founder, and then worked at AWS, working with founders to build the startup and venture capital programs in EMEA, and eventually went to build two venturing units and VC units for large energy corporations, BP and Siemens Energy. Is today I work with entrepreneurs, corporates, and VCs, and I teach entrepreneurship and strategy at the London Business School. Today we're going to cover you know, the roadmap for this session is going to be, first, we're going to talk about lean startup, its basics and how it's changing with AI. Then I'm going to introduce you to something I call the 3A framework. And you will see why. These are three strategies to use AI to apply lean startups. And then we're going to see some demos of tools and how to use those. We're going to have time for some questions and some information about future courses and engagement that we can have. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments and I'll try to take a look, but we'll have time for questions later on. Let's start with the origins. Where did the lean startup start? On the screen, you can see three core personas and the leaders of the movement, right? In the middle, you can see Eric Ries. Eric Ries is the one that wrote the Lean Startup book. If you haven't read it, I really encourage you to read it. He has now a new book called Incorruptible that I also encourage you to read about, companies at scale and how they behave. But he is the one that coined a lot of the things that we use in the terminology that we use, like pivot, A/B testing, the build, measure, learn, cycle and loop. He is the one that coined some of those elements. On the left, you can see Steve Blank. Steve Blank is an adjunct professor at Stanford, and he really talks about really going outside of the room and experiment outside of the room, outside of the building, and also the concept that startups are not small versions of big companies, and they need better tools in order to look and search for the business model, and they cannot execute on proven business models like companies at scale. And on the right, this is Alexander Osterwalder. He is the inventor of the business model canvas. And we're going to see business model canvas. This is a tool to help you search for your business model. The lean startup, in a way, I think of it as a mix of ideas and tools that we have, and both of them form something like a movement, right? So you cannot name a single person that is in charge of the entire movement. What you can see is a group of ideas and tools that are forming into a movement, such as, for example, the build, measure, learn that we all know. Startups are not a small version. Pivoting, for example, when you learn something new, you pivot to something else and another proposition. The business model canvas, MVP, minimal viable product, and there are different versions of that minimal lovable product and other things, and A/B testing, right? So you have tools, and some of those tools have been transformed into really SaaS products that we use, for example, for A/B testing, and some of them remain as frameworks and concepts that we adopt. This is the lean startup cycle. We have ideas, we build an MVP, we turn it into a product, we launch the product, we measure how customers are behaving, and then we take that data, we learn, and we iterate those ideas and products. And this is how eventually we look for our product market fit. Um, until we have it. So these are the origins of the lean startup, and hopefully you all know them, you all adopt them and apply them on a daily basis. And we're going to talk about what startup founders are doing and what they're not doing. But the question is, how does AI change how founders and companies use lean startup? And that is a big, big question. And we see early signs of founders, but also innovation managers and PMs that are changing how they are using lean startup inside of large organizations, in startups. Um, and we can identify different gaps, right? So, for example, building prototypes with AI became much easier and faster, right? So um, builders go and launch with Claude Code. They use Lovable to create MVPs. The idea of building a very lean and narrow prototype, sometimes because it's very, very easy, um, you can prototype much faster. Then builders skip the customer discovery because it's so easy. So what I see is many founders that go straight to building. They don't go to discovery. They don't talk to customers. They go straight to building because it's so easy, and AI is doing this within minutes. But the question is it hurting them in the long run? A lot more difficult to track learning and changes, because if you give your AI builder and your AI agents to build your product, and then you need to understand the reasoning and how they did and how they built the code, in many cases it's very difficult to track. And some people are struggling with that, and that is creating a loop and another problem within the cycle of building the products. The pace of iteration is accelerated because you can build faster, but the question is learning accelerated as well because of what we found here? And there are other elements that we see in the gaps. So there are pros and cons for having AI as a part of this lean startup methodology. And if you think about it today, you can imagine that, the AI is building. You have vibe coding. You can let your agents build your MVPs. The AI is measuring, and you have insights. And we'll talk about this full AI loop at a later stage. But this is why many people say that lean startup is dead, but I don't think it's dead. It's evolving, right? And you can use it for your benefit, and we will see this happening. All right. I don't know if you can see the screen that I'm moving just with the guest, but hopefully you see just the screen. Um, all right. So the three A's AI-driven lean startup framework, we're going to see it. And these are three methods that you can use AI to apply the lean startup methodology, really to solve big problems and change the world for the better. The reason that I put here for the better, if you go and listen to Eric Ries in Lenny's podcast, he mentions that everyone in Silicon Valley wanted to change the world, and even in his book, he didn't put the word for the better, right? To change the world. And eventually, what we see with social networks is they scale, they change the world, but the question is it for the better or not? So I made sure to put here that we all can align on things that we build everything for the better, no matter what we build with AI and with Lean Startup. Essentially, we have three corners for this triangle. So the first thing is to do automatic discovery with AI. The second is augmented discovery. And the final thing is agentic discovery, which is the future of lean startup as I see it. But we will see each one of those elements of the three A's. The three A's is automatic, augmented, and agentic, right? And it helps us understand, right, how can we apply lean startup with AI. To showcase them, I chose, at least for the first two elements, the business model canvas. It's visual, it's easy to understand. And in the last one, we're going to see the full cycle of agentic lean startup. If you don't know, this is the business model canvas. I encourage you to dive deep and understand. But the idea of Alexander Osterwalder is the business model that you are looking for is um, a system of all the things that we all know about, kind of the customer relationships, the segments, the channels, the value proposition, the revenue streams. But he put it all together in one canvas. And that allows us to see the big picture of the business model that we're developing or looking to validate as a repeatable and scalable business model, but also to see the dependencies between one and the other. So if we change the customer segments, that might influence on the cost structure or the revenue streams. And this is a tool to help us manage the search for a business model. In research that I'm doing with founders, early stage founders, almost 90% don't really use it, right? They don't use it with a lot of excuses, right? They don't have time, they're scrappy. But the idea is that if they are using it, they're using it one time and not managing the business model canvas for the long run. And I think that AI can be a way for them to really use it properly. And I'm going to use Word Labs. Word Labs is a physical AI or a world model company by Fei Li, who's kind of the godmother of AI. She's a professor at Stanford, and she's the CEO and founder of World Labs. You can check it out, but I'm going to use it as an example for a startup that I'm going to analyze. We're going to start with automatic discovery. So automatic discovery is quite simple, right? So the builder or the user really delegates the analysis and building of the business model canvas or another tool or idea in the lean startup movement to design with AI. So I take one tool and instead of building this from scratch, I delegate this task to AI, right? In this case, I want to build a business model canvas for the world labs, right? And I don't want to do it from scratch, so I'm going to delegate this task to AI. Let's see how it works. We have a forward process and a backward process, and I've built a tool for that to help me and founders that I work with to do that delegation. So in the forward process, I'm the builder. I'm saying, here's a prompt. This is my business idea, right? The AI is, I delegated to the AI to build this business model canvas. And then I get an output, which is the business model canvas visualized. And then I can iterate with with what we're going to see next with the augmented um, method, or that I can do this manually like we've done it before. Another way to do it is backward process, right? I already built the product. I have a website that tells exactly what it does. I'm just going to do reverse engineering of that and let the AI analyze exactly what is the business model as it depicted in what I've built, right? I'm going to show you both of them. This is a tool that I built called Between that you can try. But essentially, what you can see here is I go to this tool and I put the URL of World Labs and I let the AI to run. I delegate it to the AI. And here we go, right? We get all the different building blocks of the business model canvas, the value proposition, the channels, the customer segments. In this specific thing, it reversed engineer what it understood from the context of the website. I save this canvas, and then what I can do is I can see a visualized um, view of the business model canvas that I can interact with my team, and I can work later on with other AI tools to iterate and validate those things. But essentially, for all the founders that don't have the capacity or feel they don't have time, that AI is doing everything for them and not transferring text to the visual element. It just it does it for them, right? So we delegated this entire thing, this lean startup framework to AI. This is the other way to do that. That's quite simple. We create a canvas, we put a prompt in of what we want to build, right? Took me some time. I'm a very slow writer. All right. I put the prompt that included we build foundational world models that can perceive, generate, reason, and interact with the 3D world. And I asked it to generate the business model canvas. And this is exactly what it did, right? It understood from my prompt, what is the name of the company? What is the customer segments? Based on the context and information that I provided in my prompt, right? And I could, do a prompt that does not make sense, but the AI will reason and create that visualization. And again, you can see it here, and you can see this in this view, right? So that is quite a simple thing, right? We have a task. Instead of doing this from scratch, we're using an AI tool that does the analysis for us. The reason that I think founders need this tool is exactly what I told you, that many founders skip this because it takes time. It requires them to sit, with customers and to start the process of building this business model canvas. And typically they think they have other things to do, like going and building with a vibe coding application, right? It's very tempting to go and do this. So maybe this will create a tempting element as well to go and do some discovery first. So that's you can try it out. It's called Between Ventures. Then the other element is augmented, right? Augmented is something that I describe as a conversation between a thought partner, who's the AI, and the builder, right? So the user uses AI to creatively and collaboratively um, uh, as a thought partner to build and design the different elements of the business model canvas. So if we take the business model canvas, and this is general, even if you don't use AI, typically what I would do, I would split those blocks into those segments. And I always start with the customers. This is my preference. I understand the customer relationships, the channels, the segments. Then I go to the partners, and then I finalize with cost structure. And all of those help me understand exactly what is my value proposition, right? But we need to iterate each segment and understand each segment. So in this case, unlike the automatic lean startup discovery, we don't just do the entire task and the AI just output and spit the entire output as a canvas. But we go step by step, each building block. But this time, instead of doing this alone, we do it with a thought partner. And you can do it with Claude, with Gemini, with Perplexity, whatever you like, right? But the builder chooses an element, right? You can choose an element. You prompt your business assumptions and hypotheses that are relevant for that element. And then you have a conversation. You have a conversation with the AI tool, and eventually you're working with the AI to compose those together and understand the dependencies and changes that you need as you tweaking each element. And that's quite a tedious task. But it's an important task. So in this case, I chose customer segment, and this is the prompt I use. Usually when I teach how to do prompts, I teach 3 segments. One is to define a role. So here I said I'm the co-founder of World Labs. I wish, but I'm not. But this is who I am in this simulation. And then the context in the middle, I would like to start with the customer segments element of the business model. At the moment, we don't have a specific focus on just a single customer segment, but with our first product, Marble, we enable anyone to create spatially cohesive, high fidelity 3D worlds, because this is what I took from their website, that they enable anyone. But where do you start? And then the final part in the prompt is really the expectations that I have to get back. So help me figure out and construct a customer segment. So in this case, this is just a simple conversation between me and Claude. I put this prompt, and what it does, it goes to the get some information, some knowledge. Um, it goes to the website, goes to other blogs, and essentially it gives me 5 customer segments that you will see in a minute as potential customer segments: creative professionals, embodied AI and robotics teams, developers, scientific research, clinical, and enterprise design and industrial. If you ever build a product, that's quite a large scope of segments, right? But it also gives me some ideas, rank segments by current revenue. The idea of the augmented is not to keep that as a one time, right? But to continue a conversation with the AI to augment my thinking. What I want to stress is that it doesn't work when people think about the augmented discovery, they think about, I'm going to sit with the AI and that's it. A really interesting exercise is to sit with your co-founders or your team in a room with your AI on a screen and having a conversation between all of you, right? And that is something really, really interesting as an exercise, but it also accelerates the collaboration and the creativity. So I continue here the conversation. That is a quite a wide range. And then you can include the market segment. And I wanted to give me more and more things to build this customer segment element. So we do it block by block. And this is the augmented strategy, right? You can start with the automatic strategy. You get an initial business model canvas, and then you iterate each block with the augmented strategy. All right. Now, the big question is, can lean startup become even leaner, right? And I showed you kind of the agents loop at the beginning. And I want to talk a little bit about agentic discovery, which is, in my view, kind of the future of lean startup. And but it's a different future from what many people talk about, where everything is delegated to agents. The user fully delegates the entire cycle of build, measure, learn to a self-improving system of AI agents to increase the probability of validation with real human users with lower cost and shorter timelines. So in this agentic discovery strategy, what you can do is you can say, I'm going to let the AI do the initial discovery, but then it's not fully delegated to AI, but there's a human element. So this is how I see this evolving, right? So you have 2 loops. So you have the agentic tween loop. So you have the build, measure, learn, but this is internally done with agents, right? And then after you validate it and you have a good probability and a good understanding have a good probability that gives you conviction that based on the agent feedback that this could work, then you launch and do the build, measure, learn, right? Because customers, if you launched a product in the past, customers behave and they act in a very, very sometimes irrational things that we don't expect. So we want to do this agentic process, an agentic loop, until a certain threshold. And then we launch a human build, measure, learn loop outside of the building. And the idea here is to cut costs and to cut resources and timelines with this agentic loop. All right. So I call this first thing as an agentic tween loop, and the second one is a human customer loop. And you can do this with any feature in any product that you would like. This is how it looks like, right? I won't go into the math, but for example, if we are doing a discovery for a product, for example, we have 2 sets of agents, right? The first agent is the generation agent, it's the builder agent. And the other sets of agents are the twin feedback agents. So they are like my customer, agentic customers that give feedback to us. Now, for n agents in one cycle, and if we use majority voting, the probability is what you can see. But adding more agents to one feedback cycle doesn't mean that you will get, better insights. And this is very similar to a focus group. I don't know if you've done focus groups in the past, but if you do a focus group of 50 people, that doesn't mean you will learn more than if you do a really good focus group of 10 people, right? Sometimes it's better. So the other thing is in terms of cost and effective. So sometimes adding an additional 10 agents or 20 agents will not be cost effective in terms of compute and costs. Um, and then what we have here is that we don't do just one, right? And we need to do a series of those cycles, a series of those loops. And we have things like learning effectiveness of the builder agent, and we have different cycles, and we define the probability of the product after loop L, that we have L loops. But one of the things that we need to define is what is the threshold. So after this threshold, then we define that we have the right probability to go and launch it to humans and do the build, measure, learn with real customers, but hopefully with better probabilities of making this quick, cost-effective, that we have more quality feedback from real customers. And that might mean that we will need a smaller group of customers to test it with as well. So that is the T that we see here. This is the threshold, and it could change from company to company. And again, this is something that I'm researching at the moment. So hopefully that will be, we're going to have averages in the future, but that is the concept. Now, many people think this is a theoretical thing, but what you can do is if you already have real customers, you can build that real customer data layer. And what you can actually do is train your twin customer agents based on real customer data and behavior. And then that gives you a closer feedback to reality with your agentic loop. So if you've done in the past interviews, surveys, if you have reviews, if you have analytics, right, you train your agents into your twin feedback agents, and they are operating based on what the other agents, what real customers are behaving. The other thing that it does, it gives you a continuous understanding and changing the agents that you are basing continuous rolling of products and features based on the changes of behaviors of your customers. So this is something that you can do for the long run to understand and train agents internally to understand if things are changing in terms of preference with your customers. So in the end, this is how the workflow looks like. You have a human provides the problem statement, and then an agent one defines the hypotheses based on those insights. It builds the MVP with vibe coding or with AI, with no matter which tools you use. And then you have a set of agents, right, that are trained based on real customer data layer, and they are giving feedback to agent one. Agent one learns and then goes and defines another hypothesis. And this is kind of the loop and the workflow that is creating that system that understands, that builds, that measures, and that learns internally based on what you trained them outside from real customers. This is a demo of how that could look like, right? It's buggy, it's not perfect, but it's a demo. And so here what I'm doing is I put word labs, right? And I write my hypotheses. For example, here, making the conversational AI text box at the center of the screen will increase the new world generation by 30%, right? So people are creating new worlds. And this is my hypotheses. You can see the system defining hypotheses, developing, agent one is developing the first prototype. You can see that he put the conversational AI box in the middle, right? Centered zero prompt, creation, widget. And now this is the interesting part. Let's see what's happening. It understands, it starts ranking, right? So it gives me rating of distribution, the friction, the round one is complete. This is one loop, right? And it gives me a score, right? 2.2. And that is one of the most interesting aspects of it. Based on real customers, the agents give me also quotes, and they create stories and qualitative feedback for me to consider as if they are real customers, right? So in this case, you can see that Elena, she's a senior 3D environment artist. She says, I loaded up the viewport expecting to get straight into setting density, threshold, and tweaking texture. And then I got a giant prompt box asking for me to play a poet. So you can see that those agents are not providing only data and metrics, but they actually behave as if they are a real customer and give quotes, give the pros and cons, and I can and they even get they give me asks, right? So add an inspirational gallery of thumbnail grid for generated 3D environments. So that was loop one. It learned agent one learned what the other, I think I did 10 agents here. This is invalidated, but let's see what's happening. So agent one is going and actually building the next prototype based on the feedback. Let's see. Oh, missed it. I'm just going to find it for you. Hopefully I'll get it. But essentially, what you will see is another view when you have the grid with other worlds in it as the second iteration. I want to show it to you, but let's see if I can find it. And it gives me some data points on the round two. So essentially, what we will do several rounds of this until, oh, here it is. I don't know if you've seen, that is iteration number two with the grid. But essentially, we will do a number of those iterations and until we get to the threshold, and then we're going to stop. We're going to do a stopping rule. But this is, for example, this is the second iteration that agent one built on based on the feedback that it got from the other agents. And it goes on and on and on and on until it gets to the right threshold that we define. And then we say, okay, there's a stopping rule. We stop burning our credits. And then we go and we have a good indication on when to launch it to real customers. All right. I'm gonna I'm gonna wrap it up with something that is written at Entropic's blog, that success in LLM space isn't about building the most sophisticated system. It's about building the right system for your needs. So what you can see as an agentic loop doesn't necessarily mean that you need to start and say, all right, I'm building a new project, at Lego, at Salesforce, or I'm building a new startup. I need to build an agentic lean startup system. You might want to work with workflows or with the first two elements of the three A's in an augmented and automatic manner to accelerate your learning. And then when you have real data, then you go and build the full cycle of agentic because it also costs money, it has compute, it has other implications. But it doesn't mean that you need now to go and build an agentic system. You might have a lot of customer data that you want to build such a thing, but this is why we have three different options to apply AI with Lean Startup. I'm also going to encourage you to read this, right? This is something that I wrote to focus on AI as a new type of capital. Um, there's a Substack article that you can read about, um, but that's about it. You can reach out to me, and we have a few minutes for some questions that I'm happy to answer. And feel free also to reach out to me later on for questions or comments. So I'm opening up. I'm going to close the sharing window and feel free to ask any questions if you have them.
Hey, Ilya, Eli, Eli, right? Sorry.
Is it Eugene
Yes. Hope
talking?
you can hear me.
Yeah,
So
so
my audio
Eugene
is
and
all over.
then Reen that raised her hand. Yes,
Say
go
it
ahead.
again.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Um, I posted a question in chat.
Hmm.
Um, it's feels like majority of this is applicable for more of a end user um kind of engagement, right? Where there is a product that you're developing that's for end users or more than like a business to business where end user may not really have a major experience there.
So the question is if it's applicable also to for B2B.
Yes, specifically that's not highly. So I'm in cybersecurity, so my product is actually intended to not have any experience. So good user experience is no experience, no interaction.
Mhm. Um, for the business model canvas, for example, as an element, this is it has nothing to do, for example, with if you have a B2C product or a B2B product, right? For a B2B product, if you have a user interface and you can create some mockups, and typically you need to have an interface, even if it's like the procurement team that is using some of the products, that is applicable. If not, what you can do, you can really track behavior on the back end, right? If you have metrics, you can do that on the back end and simulate agents, right, that are doing some workflows, but they don't have an interface, right? So you can simulate the situation of your customer eventually, and the agents will not engage. In a user interface, but they will still give you some feedback and qualitative feedback, and you can train them based on surveys that you're doing with your existing customers. So it is a little bit less intuitive with the agentic workflow. You're right, but it's still applicable. Does it make sense?
Okay. Yeah, yeah, understood.
All right. Rin.
Hi. So thank you for the presentation and the overview of how to integrate Lean Canvas in a more agentic manner. My questions are related to establishing the threshold, and how to determine that in the sense of, external analysis that you may or may not have context in. Hopefully you do. That will
Mhm.
help with build. But in the sense of, this could easily exceed not only credits, but it's really like, what point are you considering the go or no go factor? And then
Right.
the kind of underlying question to this also is addressing the bias within AI in itself of the positive leaning that it might have in saying your business is fantastic can proceed, and that's because it's trained towards positive leanings when it comes to our usage. So how do you address that initially, and then how do you set the stop?
Yeah, those are two good questions. I think on the threshold determination, I don't have a good answer yet, right? So it's based on the business. What I would
Mhm.
do, I would do a lot of trial and error, right? Um, and sometimes it also depends on the credits that you have and the cost that is required to do that, right? But at least it gets you to a better position that you than you're in the wild, right? So it gives you a sense and maybe a number to say that after 10 cycles, 10 feedback cycles, you get to probability X, and then you do another iteration of the product and you run the loops and you get a different probability, right? So that is the first, I think, the first experiments that businesses can do is to understand which probabilities they get for different iterations of their products. And by
Mhm.
doing that, they can define a threshold that is right for them. Because it's research, it's still in research, you're right, still early stages. I don't want to say it's 80% or it's 90% because it might also cost you to get there. You will see the limit that it gets, and then you will see when it's the right to determine a stopping rule. So that's kind of the first thing. The second question that you had, remind me again.
It was about addressing the implicit bias by LLMs to positive leaning in responses to users.
Okay. So that's a very good question as well, right? I think the best way to do it is to make sure that if you're training the agents, if you're making sure not to include only the good feedback, right? Sometimes you want to go and feed with prompts that are more realistic. If you see that it's leaning to one end, right, you can go through. So it's a process that the builder needs to read the feedback. And that's quite one of the main problems. People see all those quotes and they just skip it, right? So you need to read the feedback of the agents and you need to see if all of them are negative or all of them are positive. And then you understand if you're biased or not. I'm sure that we'll get to the point where we can add some kind of coefficients of bias, right,
Mm.
into the system on the back end that will manage that. But again, it's not something that I've done, but I think it's possible to do. And if you do it, let me know.
Will do. Thank you.
Any other questions? I can see some familiar faces. So hi, Mene and Juan. Um,
Yeah, well, just one, and this may seem very elementary, but sometimes with lean methodology with AI, we've also done something not at the level of using agents, but we just use an LLM and we create, I call them synthetic interviews, where we have the LLM create a persona, approximate as closely as they can the kind of target customer you'd like to look at, and do a series of interviews with different iterations of that. Not so much that that's the final word, but almost as a preparation for doing live interviews. So they'll start to understand some of the issues that may come up and some of the thought processes they may see. But that's far short of doing an agentic. It's kind of a very first order kind of approximation of that. What do you think of that approach as a stopgap in effect until you can set up an agentic method?
I think that's the right approach, right? This is what I mentioned at the end. You don't have to go and build, agentic, although it sounds very cool. Agentic sounds very cool and sophisticated, but it's costly, and sometimes it's not the right thing to start with, right? So what you've done is you used an LLM workflow, right? You used a simple workflow, and you used the automatic. You delegated that creating personas to the LLM with an LLM call, and then you aggregated a few personas.
Mhm.
I think the element that is really critical is to not stop there because the
Right.
agents or the LLM does not give you a final say about the probability or conviction, right? So that is the first step, and then you go validate with the second human loop, right? So
Right.
that is a good use case of applying those two loops, but not in an agentic way, but in the automatic manner.
Okay. Okay.
Any final question? Hi, Daniel. All right. I hope it was interesting. I know it was a lot. Um, a lot of it's the early days. So I think my message to you is take this and try it out, right? If you have any relevations and things that you cover up with, that you come up with the agentic work with the agentic flow, or you have a question, you're trying to do something and you're stuck and you have a question, please let me know and reach out to me. Um, and I think that the future of lean startup is agentic, but it's also very human. So I hope that you will experiment, and I hope you learned here something new. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the evening or day. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Night.
Thank you.